Hey everyone, this is Albertina here from Cornerstone Laser again. So this is the second episode in the installment of Lasers for Beginners. So I just want to go through a couple of software options. So you might have just gotten your laser and you really want to get started and start engraving something. So most of the lasers on the market today will come with some sort of software to assist you to use your laser. Some is better than others. Some of it might be online or web-based. Others would be something that you download and install on your PC. Most of the stuff that you would get with your laser is actually pretty basic, and I'm going to end this episode with a recommendation on what software to get. So let's get started. As I mentioned previously, my particular laser is a Neji Master 2S, so it's a 30 watt laser module, and it comes with some laser software. So I'm just going to open that up. I've got the laser going on the left hand side here. So as I mentioned, it's pretty basic. So typically there would be a tutorial. I'm not going to show you how to set up your laser. My assumption is that you've already done that, followed the instructions. I just wanted to go through some of the basics of the software. Now you'll see it's actually pretty limited. If you're brand new to lasers, you've never done anything before, this would probably be a good place to start. So there's two major types of or ways that you can actually engrave something. One is called a raster engrave. So it fills in a picture, for instance, and one is called a vector engrave, and that basically traces a line. So the vector is a lot quicker because it basically just follows a bunch of lines, can get done in a very quick time, whereas a raster engraving literally goes line by line. And if you had to think of a laser beam that's a fraction of a millimeter thick, it would basically engrave a line, move to the next one, engrave another line. It takes really long. So there's two major types, and this in the photo gallery, the instructions are not particularly good for the software, but this seems to be a raster engrave. Typically when you know it's a raster engrave if there's multiple different shades in the same picture. It could be grayscale, it could be filled in. It would be very difficult to do this as a vector, for instance. The other thing that they do is called online GCode. You can see this is more suited for line engraving or vector engraving, where it would just basically trace a line and go through the motions. The other option that they give you here is CNC. So if you wanted to basically import your own picture, so most people, the reason they buy a laser engraver is because they actually want to engrave their own pictures. Now in this case, this software doesn't seem to allow you to be able to actually import your own picture and then it converts it to a G-code, which is a language that the laser understands for you. You would have to use another set of software to do that. Something like Inkscape, for instance, has that capability. So I've just got something on the screen here in terms of if you wanted to engrave a Batman logo, then you could use one of the extensions, for instance, to export this to a DXF or a path to G-code. As I mentioned, G-code is the coordinate system that is understood by lasers. That's one way to do that. You could export this as a DXF and then import it to your Neji software if you wanted to use it like that, but it's very cumbersome. I'm not going to show you how to do that. I think it's pretty archaic. It's not very user-friendly to do that. A lot of differences or discrepancies if you're using different software to generate the G-code and another software to run the G-code. So I'm not going to go into that too much. I really just wanted to show you basically how this would look if you had to use this. So I'm just going to show you basically if we had to take the Neji logo. You can see it comes out very small. It's not very user friendly in terms of resetting the size. You'll have to pretty much do that manually, for instance. The other thing that the laser does allow you to do is actually to frame it. Right, so typically if you had a workpiece or a piece of scrap material, which I've actually got on the laser at the moment, and you wanted to engrave something on it, then the framing tool is actually a really good tool to help you do that. So if I click that, basically it tells you that based on the size of the machine, this is where it's going to engrave, and it actually places that engraving in an area to actually show you. Now if I wanted to move it, for instance, I would still need to do that. It's pretty annoying because it keeps making a racket the whole time, but I would move it, for instance, up, and you can see the machine actually moves up, so it tells you where it's going. I guess that sort of sets the speed as well, makes it very slow or very fast. The way that this actually communicates with this laser, it makes it very noisy for some reason, so it depends on how the software integrates with the hardware, and the way that it sends voltage to the stepper motors actually makes it very noisy. I'm not sure if you can hear that, but there's actually a whine that comes from the motors. So if I wanted to set the burning time here, so there's two basic settings for lasers. One is the power that you output, and the second one is the time. So obviously a longer time means it gets darker, higher power means it gets darker. So sometimes, or it's very often a combination of the two that gives you a really nice engraving. Most of the time it's trial and error. Again, you can see here it's not very user friendly. If I wanted to make a setting of whatever the milliseconds is here, say 50 or 60, it's not something that you can type in all the time. You have to sort of use a slider which tells you what it is. I'm just going to briefly send this to the laser and see what happens. See, it's actually pretty slow. So this seems like it'll take quite a bit of time, and it makes a whole lot of noise. So it's pretty painful way of doing things. I'm not a very big fan of the software, to be honest. But anyway, that's it. So there's two ways that you can do it. As I mentioned, you can do a vector engraving, you can do a raster engraving. There's not a whole lot of options of importing your own things, and it's also very difficult to align a workpiece or an engraving onto an existing workpiece. For instance, if you had a coaster that you wanted to engrave, it would be very difficult to actually do it using the software. I just opened that to show you. The other alternative, and the industry standard in fact, is Lightburn. So Lightburn is it's a purchased piece of software, and it's designed specifically for lasers. You'll see that most of the lasers these days will tell you if it's Lightburn compatible or not, and I would really recommend that you get a Lightburn compatible laser. The reason for that is that laser is an incredibly powerful piece of software. It's robust. I've been using it for many years now, and it's really rock solid in terms of getting the job done. So I'm just going to show you now basically doing the same thing. The same thing that I had in Inkscape. So what I'm going to show you is how simple it is really just to import an image, trace it, and then get an engraving. And it's super simple. What I'm going to do first is I'm just going to connect it to the machine. You can hear it's much quieter. There's no humming of the motors. I'm going to home the machine so you can see where it moves to the home position. And what I'm going to do then is I'm going to import an image. I'll just take that Batman logo from the beginning over here. Now you'll see it imports it as a picture. Now obviously it's going to be difficult. It won't be difficult or impossible to engrave a picture, but what you really want to do is convert it to an SVG or scalable vector graphic. Those things give you the most flexibility. The major benefit is you can make it bigger or smaller without losing quality. Whereas for a picture, if you had to make a picture bigger, you would actually get it pixelated, and that would lose quality. So this is really how simple it is. You basically you trace the image, it basically draws a line, the software draws a line around the image. This is obviously pretty simple because it's black and white, but I use this tool heaps and heaps, and you can see it now creates an SVG, and I can scale that up and down as I wish. It also then gives you the option to do a line engraving or a full engraving, as I've mentioned earlier. So the line engraving just traces a line like a vector, so it would go around the edge, which I'll show you in a second. The full basically fills it up, so the whole thing would then be black. Now you can, just to give an indication of the difference in timing, if we did a line engraving, Lightburn can actually estimate the time, and you can see it's only about 12 seconds to do this on that size. If we had to do the same thing with a full engraving, you can see it takes 23 minutes, so it's much longer. There's obviously benefits in doing full engraving or line engravings, and I'll do that in a separate video, but for now I'm just going to show you how simple this is. I've done a lot of testing in terms of getting optimum speed and power settings for different materials, and again I'll make that into a separate video. There's quite a amount of information to understand there, but basically you can see my work area is right over there with the grid lines, which are actually engraved on the base of my laser station. And so I'm just going to frame it. What that does is it ensures that you're going to basically be lasering exactly where you plan to do it. There's other ways that you can actually set this and really easily align this to a workpiece, which again I'll do in a later video. It does take a bit of understanding, but it's super simple to do this and get repeatable results. You'll see on the left hand side, Lightburn also gives you the option of adding art libraries. So In a couple of cases where I've already engraved or traced items which I know I'm going to use in the future, you can actually save these things in a categorized format, and then in future you can basically just import them as you need them. So I've checked the settings for my laser, I've checked the positioning, and I've ensured that the height is correct. The height from my workpiece is correct, so let's get going and see what happens. And there you go. How simple was that? So yeah, it's rock solid. It works pretty much every time. The benefit of this is that you can actually do the basic CAD within this Lightburn interface, and so you can actually draw pictures, you can do arrays, you can do text, you can do offsets, you can join shapes, you can round corners, and so you can do everything in one software, as opposed to the software that comes with the laser generally. You would have to, for your own workpieces, do it in another software and then import it. This thing does everything inside it. It also has the possibility or the functionality that you could actually save settings. So one of the biggest things that people that use lasers need to do is to ensure that you're using the right setting for the right material, making sure that you don't get burned through, making sure that you don't engrave things too light. And so instead of writing it down on a separate spreadsheet, which I've had to do in the past, you could actually save it directly in a Lightburn library. So for instance, black cardboard with no thickness, just to cut it. If I assign that to this layer, then it would put the settings in that layer, as you can see. You can save things for different materials, cutting, engraving, and so it's really, really powerful in terms of importing this. And I'd really recommend using Lightburn. I know that it does cost a bit of money, but it is well worth it, and it will certainly pay itself off, especially if you want to make this into a business. Alright, so just looking at the Lightburn website, so they do have a free trial, and they do allow you to actually test it on your machine before you decide to buy it. This is the license for a GCode machine, so that's typically the machines or the version that our laser diodes run. It does cost about 105 New Zealand dollars, but that's a once-off fee. I'm not being paid or sponsored by Lightburn in any way. I just really think it's great software, and it'll pay itself off immensely in terms of its functionality. So that's it for today's video. I appreciate it if you'd like and subscribe, and thank you. Cheers.